Hi, I'm Jen Gaster from HR Heads, and I'm delighted today to introduce you to Rob Sklans. Rob, welcome. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's a pleasure. You'll be able to hear from Rob's twang that he is all the way over on the east coast of the US, so it's early morning for him, but we're delighted to have him. Rob is currently an interim HR lead for a biotech company in the US and has led that PE-backed business through COVID and all the changes that are going on there. So, Rob, perhaps you'd be kind enough just to start and give us an idea as to how you got into HR and into the role you're in today.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. So I actually started off in organizational development and training. I worked for a number of different consumer packaged goods, CPG companies. I worked for Wrigley's, Casio, and so forth. And then was one of the 12 founding members of the New Jersey OD network, the largest regional network in the state of New Jersey. And that gave me a wonderful opportunity from a networking perspective and was able to join Johnson & Johnson. I started off in their consumer business and was then able to be involved in a number of different exciting projects and roles, including leading the largest work stream of J&J's global HR transformation project. I then also did some work in organization and capability development, and then ended in the talent management COE at J&J. And I supported medical devices and diagnostics. That was about, at the time, about 33,000 employees, probably about 25 billion in revenue, just that one sector. And then from there—
globally based, I imagine.
I'm sorry?
Globally based?
Globally based, absolutely. And I supported all of the R&D functions across the 7 franchises of that sector, and then also supply chain, and then supported a business. I supported the orthopedics business as well as their talent director. And I really enjoyed working globally and had the opportunity to create and lead a talent management function for a German specialty chemicals company called Evonik. And so I left J&J, moved to Evonik, where I created and led a talent function, new performance management, succession planning, recruiting, doing a whole employer branding work, and so forth. From there, I was given the opportunity to move down the street in New Jersey, but to actually the North American headquarters of a Dutch specialty chemicals company called Royal DSM. So I'm kind of making my way through Europe there. And then
and all the cultural influences that come with that.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I spent a lot of time when I was at Evonik. I spent a lot of time in Germany. At Royal DSM, I was the head of HR for North America. And so I was on the global HRLT, and they were also doing a global HR transformation project. And so I was also part of the steering committee for that. So I was in the Netherlands quite frequently. And then from there, got my first opportunity for a CHRO role. And I moved to Elementis, which is a FTSE 250 specialty chemicals company with headquarters in London and in New Jersey. And so that was my opportunity for my first CHRO role, full board responsibility, publicly traded company, so forth. And I was basically hired, the CEO who hired me basically said, look, I need someone who knows what good HR looks like and who can actually make it happen. And given my HR transformation work, that was exactly the kind of work I was looking for. And so they didn't really have a global HR function at Elementis at the time, to the point where the performance rating scale between EMEA and Asia Pacific were the inverse of each other. So that made discussing global talent almost impossible. So was able to create a talent COE, a total rewards COE, was very blessed to be given the resources to implement Workday in 6 languages in 16 countries. And so created all of our global processes, and it was a really great opportunity. And so was there for a few years, and then was able to move to another company. I knew it was a bit of a high risk. It was a whole company transformation. Unfortunately, financially, they ran into some difficulties, and that didn't work out. So it was a relatively short stint. And then I began doing consulting. And I had always wanted to try consulting, and having led by then 5 HR transformation projects, I thought I might have a thing or two that I could provide for some other folks. And so was doing consulting for a while, and then was asked to take this interim HR leader role for a company that was just coming out of bankruptcy and was bought by a private equity firm. And so wonderful opportunity to come in, help a company transition and transform. Was working for an interim CEO, and then just recently now we have our permanent CEO. And so we're Melinta Therapeutics. It's at the moment is an infectious disease company. So we make sort of antibiotics of last resort, in some instance, some way to put it. And we sell primarily to hospitals. And so now we're looking, how do we leverage that platform to be able to broaden our business? And so, so for me, like, to summarize sort of my career path, I've had the opportunity to move back and forth between specialist and generalist roles. And part of my work at J&J on the transformation was creating what was the future role of the HR business partner, what are the centers of expertise, and designing and creating them. And part of that was a new HR competency model. So when we look at how do you develop HR executives, it's having that ability to and that experience, having moved from specialist to generalist, and then potentially back and forth a couple times, so that you have strong expertise in certain areas, but then also the broad strategic view to be able to be an effective HR executive.
And I think that it's that commercial overview as well, actually,
Yes.
so understand the business objective and end goal, and are fit for purpose in that sense.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So having stepped into this role, you've obviously got a brand new CEO in post, and I think you said that was a lady, so she's got her agenda and strategy you're going to be sort of supporting. What is on that radar for you then over the next sort of 6 to 12 months? What is it you've got to focus on for the HR division to be able to support Melinta in its strategy?
Yeah. So one of the first roles was I proactively designed the entire onboarding process for our new CEO, and so partnering with her even before she started around how do we make her transition as efficient and as effective as possible? How do we give her an opportunity to interact with our leadership team, our executive committee? And how do we give her a broad overview of the business in a fairly condensed period of time? And one of the things that was really exciting about her is, as opposed to just sort of people, parading on Zoom and presenting to her, in our COVID environment, nobody's in the office.
I was going to say, has all this onboarding been done remotely as well?
Yes, actually all of my onboarding into the company was virtual, and all of hers was virtual as well.
Okay.
And so, so instead, she wanted the entire executive committee and any of our direct reports that we felt would be important to actually go through this onboarding process with her. So for a week and a half, we went all the way through all the functions. We did deep dives in all the functions, all of our products, all the businesses, had our, medical science directors talking through, the medical parts of our products, then the commercial folks talking that through. And so, I mean, for me, it was a wonderful learning opportunity, but also, for the executive committee to really ask questions and so forth. And then I just finished that with a new leader assimilation process with these
And I
individuals.
guess if nothing else, it means you all come from the same understanding of what the business is about and what you're trying to do, which I've heard of a lot of companies doing virtual onboarding, but not wrapping everybody into the process, just delivering it to the new person.
Yeah, and so this created that common foundation for us in terms of what's working and what's not,
Yeah.
uh, and that then really enabled us to have um, sort of a common truth, so to speak, but a common foundation that we could start to talk about where do we need to go as a company and what do we need to be doing differently. From the HR perspective, the company went through a bankruptcy process, so there was a lot of reduction. There was a lot of reduction, not just in people, but in offerings and so forth. And so this was really an opportunity as we look at our strategy moving forward. We're going to be acquiring other assets, other companies, and so forth as a part of our growth plan. And so, how, as an HR leader, do I create a foundation where we can quickly, efficiently, and effectively integrate new companies? So, what's
And
that
hook you into
foundation?
it. Yeah.
Yeah. But then also, our company was actually formed by the merger of three separate companies together. And so, as we look to bring in other companies, um, we need to have a solid foundation around our culture. And that was not necessarily a focus previously. And so, for us, one of the first pieces of work is actually around a top-down, bottom-up approach to creating what is the Melinta culture. And so having the executive committee sort of talk about, what are the key areas of our culture and what does that look like? And then engaging our employees to actually be able to say, okay, well, those are the main areas. Well, what does that look like behaviorally? What
How
does
does
that
it
look like?
translate?
Yeah, how do we
Yeah.
translate that? Um, that that builds engagement in this new culture. It builds excitement around this new culture, and it also does a heck of a lot of great work for HR because I can now, once that process is done, I can take those behaviors, I can build interview guides, I can build that into our performance review, I can build it into our talent identification process. So it's a lot of great work, and the employees are going to be helping us to create that. So when it shows up in their performance review, they're going to be like, oh, well, that looks pretty familiar, as opposed to some competency that people have never heard of before,
Yeah.
a bunch of
Yeah.
HR speak. It'll be real behavior. And so that's some of our first pieces of work. It's around building an infrastructure, for me, creating efficient and effective processes, focusing on our culture, and then really looking to that, they've not done basic things like talent assessment and talent reviews in a number of years. And so it's an opportunity now to bring that back and really
Yeah.
look and assess our bench and look at where do we need development, where do we need to bring in some fresh talent, and how do we create those basic foundations of talent management and strategic HR for the company.
Okay. You talk a lot about talent there, and I know that talent makes the business, full stop, right?
Mhm.
Um, there is a lot of chat within the HR space right now about the D&I of talent, so diversity and inclusion of talent. I appreciate you've just landed, but is it on the agenda, and what are you looking to achieve in that space?
Yeah, so it is, and for us, again, it's something that is a very important part of our future agenda. There are some small things that we've done now. So some basic things around diverse slates as we're looking to recruit. And one of the things that our managers have heard me say is, if you don't have a diverse slate, you're not done recruiting.
Yeah.
And so, so some basic things like that. One of the things that's quite prominent now, and I'm sure folks globally may or may not have seen, is around Black Lives Matter. And so that's really important for us as a company. And we not only made a statement, a lot of companies in the US made statements, but what was really important is not just statement, but action. And so one of the things that we did is besides we sort of combined together our statement around Black Lives Matter with the implementation of a new policy, which is a volunteer day. And what we basically said is, we want you to take this, and we want you to give back to the communities where we live and work, and to really focus around social justice and inequity, and use that time to begin to improve what's happening in our country.
Yeah.
And so by combining those two things together gave us an opportunity to not just make an important statement, but to follow that with action. And there's a lot more that we need to do and will do as an organization.
Yeah, perfect. And I think many businesses are talking about the fourth industrial revolution, that impact of technology on HR. As a private equity backed business, I'm sure tech is very much at the heart of what they're looking to do with you. What impact has that had in the HR space for you? Is it being embraced? Is a quick yes no question, I guess?
Yeah, so it's certainly being embraced, and for us in particular, with limited resources from a
Yeah,
people perspective, leveraging technology is a key uh, foundational component of my strategy. And so looking more around um, workforce intelligence. How do we start to not just have data floating around, but actually be able to use that
yeah,
to try to put in more analytics in place? And where we have opportunities, there's a lot of talk around AI and so forth,
yeah,
but for us, as we're looking just even from an HRIS standpoint, having AI built in, the ability to have bots and other kinds of things to assist with some of the more routine tasks are things that we're looking at. So I do think, while I don't have some snazzy whiz bang thing to show you at the moment, but it's how do we sort of think about that as we're building out our foundation, our infrastructure for HR.
yeah. And Rob, when we started the conversation, you very much said you're home based. I'm home based. We're all in our home offices. COVID has meant that that's perhaps the case for the rest of the year. How have you had to use technology just to facilitate that functionality of the business? Everyone being remote.
Yeah, so as with most companies, using any of the
Yeah,
Zoom, GoToMeeting, or any of those kinds of things. But um, but I guess taking a step back in terms of COVID and in general, I have a little bit of a unique background. So besides my sort of HR professional life, I've also spent the past 30 years as an emergency management professional. I volunteer with my county Office of Emergency Management. And so pandemics was certainly one of the things that we planned for. We would do exercises around and so forth
you're
on an
probably the only man I've spoken to that can hand on heart say that. The rest of us are running around like headless chickens, going, "What do we do?"
yeah. So fairly early on, I don't remember when I published it. I think it was in March or April. I just had all these thoughts kind of um, in my head, and I wanted to kind of get them out. And so I actually wrote a LinkedIn article about that, which kind of combined, or I tried to combine HR and my emergency management perspective. And there were four areas where I really felt we needed to focus. And again, this was in March.
Yeah,
And so when things were just really getting going in the States, but one was around communication and helping leaders to effectively communicate. And in the beginning, a lot of people they didn't want to say anything because they didn't know everything. And I'm like, look, if you're not communicating, people are going to make it up. They're going to make
Yeah.
up stuff.
You might not have all the answers now, but it's better to say something.
Exactly. So using Zoom, using video, maintaining that personal connection, but being able to talk about, like, here's what we're thinking. So, here's our thinking so far. Here are the issues that we're talking about as an executive team now. And here's how we're going to come back to you on these different topics. And we don't have all the answers, and we'd love to hear from you about things that are impacting you and how we can make things better for you. So communication was one critical thing, and I went into a bunch of detail around that. But the second thing was, we didn't know what this was going to look like. And so from a business standpoint, um, executives need to take themselves out of the crisis and start to think through scenario planning. Well, there may be parts of our business that may explode now because there's new demand. There are other parts that may vanish overnight. And so how are we going to deal with that and think about that? And our employees are counting on us to not be so focused on the day-to-day parts of the crisis, and to take that step back and think through scenarios, so that when things happen, we could potentially actually have a competitive advantage because we know how we're going to move.
Yeah.
So thinking that through, the next thing was to think about reintegration. And people were like, oh, again in March, oh, this will be a couple of months and everything will be fine. And I'm like,
and here we are, nearly September.
Yeah. And I was like, in March, you need to be thinking a lot longer term about this. And things may not quite resolve as fast as you think. So,
and not go back to what it was. That's the thing, isn't it? We're not going back to what it was. We're going back to something different.
right. And that really sort of also meshes with the fourth element, which was use this as an opportunity to really think about what is the future of work, and where does work happen? What does work look like? And use this as an opportunity not just to make do, but to make a leap forward as an organization. And this really proved that working virtually can be effective, and people can actually work from home and be just as, if not more, effective. So how do we leverage that? And for Melinta ourselves, we're thinking about, well, we're actually looking for new space, and so our lease is sort of coming up, and we're starting to think about, well, so what does that mean to have an office, and what is the purpose of an office now, and how will that change? And given work from home, which we're not in a rush by any means to move away from, when do you use an office, and in what scenarios, and so forth?
And do Melinta think the office physicality, the office, is important for the culture? Is that connected?
So it is, and when people are in an environment, that environment impacts the culture, and the culture can impact environment as well. But yeah, understanding that culture, and how do we, this moves to the whole concept of, what is the employee experience, and so forth. So our physical presence is the physical representation of our culture. And so what does that look like, and what does that mean? And what does an open environment mean? And how do we create collaboration spaces? And some of those spaces may be physical, some of them may be virtual, and some may be a hybrid. And what does that look like? And so yes, the physical environment has an important role in culture.
So you'll have an office. You just don't know what it'll look like yet, or where it'll be, or what
Yeah,
the people.
we're pretty early in the process. We're just sort of we're sort of touring space and working with an architect to just kind of talk aloud about what some things might look like. And and some folks are like, well, yeah, we'll have a therapy, we'll have, and everything is going to go back to normal. And I'm like, yeah, I'm not quite so sure about that. And I'm not sure we want to go back to what things were. So this really is that point to be able to move forward. And I go into more detail about these 4 areas in the article, and
We'll
happy to
put a
chat with
link to
folks.
the article
Yeah,
at the bottom of this so that everyone can digest that, because I think everyone would love to read that in depth.
yeah. It was written in March, but I think it's still fairly relevant.
Um, Let me ask you briefly then, if you had any sort of key learns or takeaways, certainly since you started with Melinta and since March and the world being slightly different, what would they be? What would you what advice would you give? What have you taken away for yourself that you think is really crucial?
Yeah. Um, um, the ability to still connect on a personal level
Mm.
doesn't go away.
Yeah.
And while yes, we can communicate by Zoom and telephone and email and all of that other fun stuff. Um, this really brought to the forefront um, a lot more of the work-life awareness, and having people in their homes with their kids running around and all of that other stuff. It brought a lot more of the human part to this and to our interactions, and I really don't want to lose that as we go forward. And so, even if we do return to the office and everything else, there's a lot um, that people have just, there's a new way of sort of looking at people and looking at work and realizing that our employees are part of a social system outside of work and their family. And while a lot of companies talk about that, um, I don't think it was really quite as evident as now. And you're talking to some people and they're in the middle of their kitchen,
Yeah.
and so it it's something that I want to make sure we don't lose.
I
And
think the systems are blurring as well. You talk about the social system, but the definition and the barrier has been blurred
yeah,
somewhat. And you're right, you're seeing people's homes and children and pets and gosh, I've seen bedrooms and all sorts. It's you know
yeah,
that boundary has gone away, and we always had a very professional facade. We went to work, we dressed appropriately. I haven't put a suit on for 6 months.
yeah. Me either.
Yeah. Um,
Yeah.
and I think
You're
you're right.
lucky this shirt has a collar, so
Yeah,
there
there
you
we
go.
go. We're all very nice. Yeah, it's just one of those, and it won't go back. We won't lose that. That blurring is there to stay, I think.
Yeah, I hope we don't lose it. I hope we don't lose it. And our new CEO is very just come as you are. Um, and so there's people in t-shirts, and so forth, and it's all totally fine.
Yeah.
And someone's child will run in or someone's dog is barking, and everyone's like, well, yeah, it just is. And I I really hope we don't lose that. And it's one of the things that I'm really going to take with me from this, um, to do my best to make sure that we don't lose that.
Perfect. Rob, it's been an absolute pleasure to speak with you. As promised, I'll put a link to your article in the bottom of this so the audience can read that and digest it. But right now, I just want to say real thanks for your time, and hopefully that's provided some great insight to our audience.
Oh, well, thank you. It's been my pleasure.
Pleasure.